So thank you so much, Jan. Thank you, Eileen, for that beautiful song. I've heard it so many times, but it just hit different this morning. And really got choked up. And it was a perfect lead-in to my talk, as well as the words that Jan said at the end of her meditation. So I'm so happy to be with all of you today. It feels like coming home, and I'm grateful. So thank you for the invitation. So let's talk about the path to vulnerability. It takes courage to be vulnerable. Wouldn't you agree? And we wonder, will I continue to be liked if I'm vulnerable and share my thoughts and feelings? It takes courage to be authentic, to be our true selves, and to speak our truth. Brene Brown says the foundation of courage is vulnerability, the ability to navigate uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. So let's unpack this a little bit. What does it mean to be vulnerable? When someone is vulnerable, they are allowing themselves to be seen fully and honestly. It is the act of sharing your thoughts, emotions, fears, or needs without knowing how others will respond. And when we share authentically, it truly opens up a door to connection, even though there may be a risk of rejection, judgment, or perhaps misunderstanding. But when we share our authentic selves with others, we share our true self with them, and that puts us in a vulnerable position because what we share might not be received in a positive spirit. I have a few regrets in my life when I wasn't completely authentic. When I closed my business, when I did facials and Reiki, I closed the business because I was bored. That's the truth. But I didn't want to admit that to myself at the time. And I didn't know what to move on to. I had wonderful clients who had been with me for many years. I didn't know how to tell them that I wanted to move on, especially when I didn't know what my next step was. It can feel scary to be authentic with ourselves and with others. So when I didn't want to admit to myself that I was bored, even though my little voice was telling me that over and over and over, because our little voice is our soul talking to us, right? Gently guiding us. But we have free will. So when I didn't listen, I developed shoulder pain, like so intense that I then had to close my business because I physically couldn't do the work anymore. And that provided me with a quote unquote acceptable excuse in my mind to tell my clients why I was closing. And looking back on that experience, I initially thought when I had the shoulder pain that I was getting hit by the spiritual two by four. Like when Oprah has said to us that first you get the whisper, and if you don't listen, then you get a thump, and if you still don't listen, you get the bomb. But sometimes we need to make space before the next great adventure reveals itself in our life. So at the same time that I closed my business, I was just starting to go to CSL on a regular basis. And as I created this space in my life by closing my business, an inner urge began to emerge for me to become a practitioner. And at the time, I didn't even know what a practitioner was or what they did. But my inner voice was moving me in that direction. And I answered the call. So initially, I thought the shoulder pain, as I said, was to get my attention because I wasn't listening to where my soul was leading. But as I look back on that, I have a deeper understanding that it was my body that provided me with a seemingly acceptable reason to close that chapter of my life and move on. Because our bodies are really always on our side, protecting us, guiding us, even if it doesn't appear that way sometimes. But wouldn't it have been nice and a whole lot less painful if I had enough self-love, self-respect, and respect for my clients to be authentic at the risk of being vulnerable? To have said something like, the time has come for me to close this chapter of my life and create space for what wants to be expressed next through me. Doesn't that statement feel like it comes from a more empowered place? But I'm not beating myself up over that. I'm observing. That was what was worked for me at that time. And now I realize and truly believe that when we honor ourselves by doing what's right for us, it is honoring and right for everyone else involved. And it also gives others permission to do what is right for them because it's modeled for them. Don't you admire someone who has clear boundaries and states them clearly with kindness and respect? Because I know I do. Another time when I wasn't as authentic as I could have been, many years ago, I used to walk with someone I knew from a group that I belonged to. And as we walked and talked, I realized that we weren't, quite aligned in our goals and our beliefs or our personalities, really. And I wish I had said something like that instead of when she asked why I didn't want to walk anymore, that I said I didn't have the time. And by not respecting my feelings, I wasn't respecting her right to know, even though I thought I was sparing her feelings. So, vulnerability means showing up as your real self, even when it feels uncomfortable. It's not weakness, it's actually courage in action. The Annapolis Counseling Center defines a vulnerable person as someone who is emotionally brave, willing to be honest about what they feel and need, even when it's hard. They go on to say that the vulnerable people know how to express their feelings without shame, are open to giving and receiving feedback, can admit when they are struggling or hurt, and let others in emotionally, even when it's risky. But that doesn't mean oversharing or sharing everything with everyone. It's about discernment, standing in your power, your most authentic self, and sharing with the right people in the appropriate time and settings. And we also must know our audience and be able to read their level of openness and interest in what we are saying. As I've moved along on my spiritual path and my own path of vulnerability, my thoughts and ideas about God, the universe, have deepened and evolved. And in the past, I've gotten sometimes a little too overzealous about my feelings, about expressing my feelings about life and God and religion the religion that I was raised in. And I did this once with my cousin. We were having a very deep conversation. And I realized afterwards and I was getting very overzealous about my feelings. But what I realized afterwards is that he never asked me what my feelings were. And he was still practicing in that religion. So after the conversation, when I reflected upon it, I had the awareness that I overshared and that what was saying could have been perceived as not showing respect for his beliefs and practices. When in truth, I believe whatever facilitates someone's feeling connected to the all that is, to life, to God, is whatever is right for them at that time. So we must know our audience and read the room, so to speak, and share what is safe and appropriate to do so. A friend of mine shared a quote with me that says, "Speak from the heart, listen from the heart, be spontaneous, and be lean of expression." Meaning, listen more than share, and share from your heart when appropriate. And I got to admit, I'm still learning to put this into practice. But vulnerability isn't about revealing everything to everyone. It's about choosing openness with the right people at the right time for the sake of authentic connection. The Annapolis Counseling Center offers these examples for what being vulnerable might sound like. I'm feeling overwhelmed and I don't know what to do. I care about you deeply and I'm afraid of losing you. I made a mistake and I'm sorry about the way I handled things. A vulnerable person is emotionally brave, someone who's willing to be honest about what they feel and need, even when it's hard. And there's another side to vulnerability. When someone feels insecure or emotionally fragile, they may fear being hurt or losing something. And as a result, they try to do everything themselves to stay safe. And to me, this type of vulnerability stems from fear and separation. But sometimes we forget that we are never separate from our good because we're never separate from God. But turning insecurities into vulnerabilities is the process of moving from fear-based defensiveness to courageous openness. It's important to remember that we are human as well as spiritual, and to embrace our humanness and kindness with compassion and grace. And when we can do that for ourselves, we can do that for others as well. In the Bible, vulnerability is portrayed not as a weakness, but as a profound strength and a pathway to divine grace. Jesus modeled this by embracing human limitations, experiencing deep emotion, and enduring crucifixion. So being vulnerable is to be real. It means to show up as our whole self, our messy parts and all. It's not about perfection. It's about honesty, courage, connection. And when we have the courage to be honest with ourselves and with others, we build a stronger and deeper connection. So the path to vulnerability allows us to practice showing up as our whole self, our true self, foibles and all. It is also being in spiritual alignment with our divine essence or our soul. It invites us into a deeper connection, first and most importantly with ourselves, and then with others, and of course with God. That God is within us. And God chose to express through each of us as us in an individual way. So our call is to show up as that individualized expression of God in the way that only we can. And we can do this more and more as we realize that we are always loved by God, the divine, the creator of all that is, no matter what. So the more that we realize that, the more that we feel that, the more that we know that we are always loved, it encourages us to get in touch with that courage within and be vulnerable and to be real. On the path to vulnerability, allow yourself to honor and respect yourself and others by showing up authentically, being open to love and connection. Imagine how the world could change if we all had the courage to be vulnerable and more authentic. In closing, I'd like to share a passage from Brené Brown's book, Daring Greatly. Vulnerability is the core, the heart, the center of meaningful human experiences. It is not weakness. It is our most accurate measure of courage. To be vulnerable is to be certain, to risk emotional exposure, and to show up without knowing the outcome. Yet it is through this willingness to be seen, fully and imperfectly, that we create connection, foster belonging, and experience love. And so it is.